June and July are usually some of our biggest months. And if I go back and look, June of 2023, last year, 333 sold, highest month. June of 2022, 412 sold, highest month. 2021, 470 sold, highest month. Now, June of 2020, I know a lot of us we've erased that from our memory, but 453 sold. It was not the highest.
Wow.
Now, McKay, do you want to go back to June of 2020 and tell me why it wasn't the highest month?
Because people were using COVID money to remodel their homes.
Or were stuck. Or were stuck in their homes in that case. I could not go look at real estate. So yes, you are. What you say is correct and has been reported in the news. But... Good morning, this is Lance Kenmore with the Kenmore team, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of the Tri-Cities Real Estate Update. As always, you can contact me, Lance Kenmore, anytime direct on my cell phone at 509-727-8977, or visit us on the web at kenmoreteam.com. Once again, I always like to thank John for hosting and everybody for working to make this happen. Mr. John McKay, how you doing over there?
Well, let's see. Me and rollers and paintbrushes are attacking the deck.
No, you aren't. Yes, are you serious?
Bare deck over.
Okay, softball is in between seasons, and you are Mr. Home Improvement.
Well, I'm doing it on weeknights to free me up for the weekend.
Well, the wind has been a little bit better, so that should be okay.
Yeah, and I just got it. The dogs are sitting there looking out. Okay, when can we go out? You can't run across the deck because you're going to track them. No, we want to go out.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about listing and home improvement this time of year. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to lead us into that topic very, very well there for sure. Yes. Well, we always like to start off with our crazy national celebrity house story. Mm-hmm. And so here's one for you. An iconic Illinois mansion that was the star of the Home Alone series. So this was the house where on the exterior shots of Home Alone were filmed. So the big, beautiful brick house. Well, that house has actually hit the market. Now, interestingly enough, though, only the exterior shots were filmed at this house. If you look at the listing photos of this house, you won't recognize the interior as the home that it was because that was all filmed on set. Now, it took me a little while to figure that out, McKay, but that is the story that we're getting on that.
Okay.
Now, mind you, this home, though, itself is pretty impressive. At $5.2 million listed, it's almost 9,000 square feet.
Wow.
Beautifully, beautifully done interior. And then also a half-court basketball court in the basement of this house where you can get full-on three-point line shot practice for sure. So you can channel your inner Caitlin Clark on this listing for sure. So if you would like to own a piece of cult movie/television history, the Home Alone house is currently for sale and can be yours for $5.2 million. So, John, we always like to kind of temper the national headlines with local real estate headlines with what's happening here in the Tri-Cities. Now, I got to tell you, we've talked a lot this year about the commission lawsuits, what's been going on in the real estate industry, what's been going on in Washington in particular. And I got to tell you, with this subject, Washington State continues to be in the absolute epicenter of what's happening nationwide.
Ooh.
Another bombshell out of Washington this week. And that is that the Northwest MLS, and I'm going to have to kind of explain who the key players are on this, But the Northwest MLS is an MLS that covers a large portion of Washington State and parts of Oregon. So when you think like, you think the I-5 corridor and you think King County and that, the Northwest MLS is the main operator of listings in that part of the state. They also cover Hermiston, Umatilla, for instance, and then they sneak around kind of around Yakima and Tri-Cities, and they also cover Walla Walla now. Now that was recent in the last year. So Tri-Cities is not covered by the Northwest MLS. We're covered by what's known as the PAC MLS.
Okay.
But I'm going to have some thoughts on what's going on there with this. So, as you know, we talked about the national settlements and the new rules that were coming on for the National Association of Realtors that were going to be going into effect in August here.
Okay.
Well, the Northwest MLS said they had a chance to, with all of these lawsuits, people started settling. You saw companies like Keller Williams, Remax, EXP, looking at settling in these lawsuits. By doing that, they exempted themselves from future litigation with what was happening. Well, the Northwest MLS is not an NAR MLS. It's not National Association of Realtors MLS. But they were given the option of opting into a settlement with the litigation. And basically, they told them to buzz off on this deal.
Wow.
They are not opting into the settlement, and they have one major sticking point for their reasoning for that. So according to the Northwest MLS, the biggest reason why they're not opting into that settlement is what's called the shared compensation rule. And we've talked a little bit about this on the show, and people find it somewhat bizarre. But one of the things coming out of the settlement, one of the things the Department of Justice is trying to do to break up real estate commissions and to decouple that so where sellers pay their own and buyers pay their own. One of the things, the steps they were taking to do that is they were saying that in the multiple listing service, they no longer wanted the buyer's agents to be able to see how much the seller was willing to pay them. Now, part of that reasoning was because after January 1st in Washington, we were required to negotiate directly with our buyers before we started working with them to get paid by the buyer if the seller wasn't offering any compensation.
Okay.
Well, to basically enforce that and speed that up, what they're saying is, hey, if your deal is truly with the buyer, then you shouldn't care what the seller is offering. But that's not what's happening in practice, because a lot of sellers, even with this coming along, at least at this point, are still choosing to offer incentives to buyer's agents to bring the buyer and the buyer to those houses.
Okay.
So the other side of the equation, as they're going through these settlement terms and agreeing to settle, that part of what they're trying to do is a little give and take here to say, okay, if you enter into a buyer's agreement with your buyer, you can still get compensation from the seller, but to really kind of force you to do this, we're not going to tell you what the seller's willing to pay. It seems bizarre, right? Like it seems like almost like grade school-esque, but this is where we've ended up with on this settlement. Well, it's bizarre enough that the Northwest MLS says, this is our biggest hang-up. The Northwest MLS is saying, we are not doing that. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And actually, what they said they think will happen is because the settlement actually said you can offer sellers, you can offer compensation to buyer's agents if you want to speed up, the sale of your house, or you want to incentivize it to sell faster, or you think it's a better way to sell. To be able to do that, you can still offer to pay buyer's agents, but we're not going to put it in the MLS. So the next question is, how the heck does anybody know what it is?
Yeah.
Well, they were saying, well, maybe it would go on agents' websites, but then the Department of Justice doesn't like that. They were saying maybe it will go on a third-party website, but Department of Justice is going to come into play and say, no, you can't be doing that. And then we have to decide who's going to police all of this. Well, Northwest MLS stood up and said, this is ludicrous. We need to be able to, if sellers want to, offer a compensation to buyer's agents, regardless of if they're getting paid by their buyer agent. And because of that, we're not going to opt into the settlement. And we're going to move forward because we've actually been doing this for, 3 to 4 years in the Northwest MLS. That's their take on the situation. So we've got this pendulum that is very, very strange because at the beginning of the year, Washington State was one of the first states to come in and say you have to have a buyer, you have to have a brokerage services agreement with your buyers. You have to have something signed with your buyer to provide them real estate services. So we were way ahead of the curve. And then fast forward, NAR does a settlement. Many of the terms of the NAR settlement, Washington raises their hands and says, hey, catch up, everybody, the rest of the nation. We've already been doing this now. In fact, it's agency law now. So catch up. It's working. It's working well in Washington. We're already doing it. Well, they throw in this wrench about not being able to disclose commission. And Washington said, we've had not Washington, Northwest MLS, but primarily a big chunk of Washington says, we've had enough. This is just ludicrous. Like the other things that happened, you modeled after Washington. We've been doing it. You've modeled after the Northwest MLS. This is just ludicrous now. And so we're not going to participate. No one knows what the ramifications of this is going to be yet. And that is where this is like putting Washington in the middle of the national soap opera of real estate. And we're right here now saying we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people are speculating that their Department of Justice is going to step in and come in and say, like, this is great. We didn't even want you guys having this in the MLS. Now you're saying you're not going to comply and put it in the MLS. This is not the end of the story. I can guarantee you it's gonna be a wild ride to see what happens. A lot of that stuff that's happening is way above my pay grade. I mean, I can comment on it here. We can talk about it and discuss. Yeah. But I mean, I've got some feelings there a little bit. And here's the thing that I'm unsure about, but I can give you what I think could potentially happen, which is interesting. I think sometimes people have a very hard time with change. So here you have an MLS that covers the majority of Washington State, but doesn't cover like Yakima, Tri-Cities. We're separate. A lot of agents, I hear chatter in the background of people like, I still want this offer of compensation in the MLS. I hear it nationally. I hear people in other states talking about it. So here we are. I can tell you it would be a very, very easy decision for people that want more of the same, for agents and firms and the Tri-Cities as a whole to look at the Northwest MLS and say, that's never been a more attractive option. We haven't joined that in the past, but now on a state level, and we're already utilizing some of their forms, is there an argument for joining the Northwest MLS? I can tell you personally, my firm, I'm already a member of both because I have to cover Hermiston, Umatilla, Pendleton, Walla Walla. So to expand our coverage area, our firm's already a members of both. So I see the pros and cons of both. If I could consolidate to one system, there's an argument for it. There's also counter arguments for us being separate. I can tell you that. One of them is that nobody knows, by not opting into the settlement agreement, is Northwest MLS looking at a bigger litigation issue coming down the pipeline? There's going to be something. Like I said, McKay, people aren't just going to look at this decision and then go back into a cave and just let them operate on their own. There's going to be more to report on this. So it's super fun for me from a news perspective, a radio show perspective. You know, we're just constantly having to keep up with these changes and modify our business practices. I've never seen our business practices change so much in one singular year as all of this stuff that is happening. So we're constantly monitoring it. It's still easy to buy and sell houses right now. I can tell you that much. I don't want the consumers to be fearful of that.
Yeah.
It's just the mechanism of how that's happening couldn't be more different this year than it has been the last 19 years in real estate.
Wow.
So, John, the next thing that I was going to talk about, I keep getting this question a lot, especially this time of year, and here we are rolling over to June 1st here. And a lot of people ask me, is this truly kind of the busiest time in real estate? Like, is this the month to sell? Everybody says late spring market, summer market. What does that look like? So I said, well, number one, I always like to start with data so that we're absolutely giving a clear picture of what the data says. And if you go back and look, the data says that it is the busiest month. Okay. Now, if we look at truly sold numbers, June is normally the highest closing month. Now, one of the things you have to realize about that is some of those closings, though, came from work that we've been doing the last 2 and 3 weeks.
Okay.
Because there are some closings that will happen. We'll go under contract in the next week and a half. But June and July are usually some of our biggest months. And if I go back and look, June of 2023, last year, 333 sold, highest month. June of 2022, 412 sold, highest month. 2021, 470 sold, highest month. Now, June of 2020, I know a lot of us we've erased that from our memory, but 453 sold. It was not the highest.
Wow.
Now, McKay, do you want to go back to June of 2020 and tell me why it wasn't the highest month?
Because people were using COVID money to remodel their homes.
Or were stuck or were stuck in their homes in that case. I could not go look at real estate. So yes, you are. What you say is correct and has been reported in the news. But so that particular year, it was not the highest, but we had a little bit of extenuating circumstances. What's interesting, though, is because of the built-up demand, the very next month, I just pulled the data just to make sure, July of 2020 set the record for Tri-Cities and was 535 because of the pent-up demand. So it went from, being stuck to going crazy after that. So really, the data shows us that June and July are some of the highest closing months. And people are sometimes ask me, well, what's the reason? What's going on? Why should I be listed then? Why should I be talking to you about getting my home on the market during those months? The number one factor is convenience. I've got to just tell you, it comes down to convenience. It's just easier to get your home on the market and get it sold. Think outdoor living space and pools, for example. It's much easier to showcase that and have that open now when you're not worried about freezing temperatures or you're not worried about closing the cover and then opening the cover. Also, more kids are out of school. A lot of people like to coordinate the move so it's not interrupting the school year or throwing kids off of their normal schedules.
Yes.
They can have them help pack and get things ready. So a big one for that, a big contingent of people are trying to move while the kids are out of school. Obviously, the weather is better. We've seen that. We're starting to get into some of those amazing Tri-City nights that we've had in the last week, and we know that only gets better. And better weather also leads to better curb appeal. So one of the things you have to look at right now is it's a lot easier to have your yard and your curb appeal dialed in right now. I will say, though, I do put an asterisk by that comment. One of the things that I see people sometimes mess up in this selling situation with yards and yard maintenance, if you're used to doing it all yourself, I would consider hiring a service for the 2 to 3 months that you're on the market. I only say this because not only is it important while you're listed, it's very important in that time frame from when you're sold to when the house actually closes. Yeah. Especially if somebody's moving out of the area, because people will be at home every day. They'll take care of their yard. They'll get the house under contract. They'll move out of state. The buyer was buying a beautiful yard that they loved. It was part of the reason why they bought it. The seller left out of state, and their third cousin was going to take care of the yard while they were gone the next 45 days. And they forgot about it, and they didn't come over, and they burned up the lawn. And now we have a different closing problem. So I put an asterisk by that and say, if you're going to be moving out of the area or busy doing a lot of the packing yourself, in that time frame, consider hiring a service for 4 to 6 weeks to handle that transition time period for you. The other reason why we see houses sell for more money this time of year in many cases and sell faster is outdoor living space. It's like cheating on the square footage. Twice this week, I've been showing homes and been on patios that make the house feel bigger than it actually is. You open up the sliders, everybody's standing around. We've been in the 70s. It's 73 on the patio. It's 73 in the house. They can't tell the difference. They're standing out there and they're like, this is awesome. Yeah. This room is huge. And I'm like, well, I don't know if it really is, but it feels like it is. So you're cheating on your square footage with some of those patios, especially when people stage it and they have, sometimes I've seen the outdoor couch is nicer than the indoor couch. They spend equal amount of time out there. So you're able to cheat on your square footage and make the house feel bigger than it really is this time of year. So that is a big one. The other thing that I tell people this time of year is, yes, more houses are going to sell, and the numbers are bigger, and it's easier to get people through this time of year. But you have to be careful because you have more competition. So one of the reasons we have more sales is better inventory comes on and more people wait till this time of year. But what that means is if there's only 2 houses for a buyer to go look at, you just have to be better than one person. And if they're in the price range and they have the beds and baths that they want, they're going to pick, you just have to be slightly better than the other person in that case. Well, now if a buyer has 4 or 5 or 6 to go look at, you have to be really dialed in, especially if they're keeping those in good condition. Their yards look nice. So there's an argument that says this time of year, you have to, not only is it a little bit easier to keep the curb appeal, but you can't ignore it. You have to be dialed in better this time of year to get the maximum return on going on the market and getting that house sold. So that's what I got for you guys this week. It is an awesomely busy time of year for real estate. You see in the data numbers, we are extremely busy. We're putting on great inventory though. So if you're a buyer that's spent the last 3 months sidelined by high interest rates, we've had a little bit of interest rate relief. And now you have more choices. So in the next 2 months, you're going to have more choices than you've had all year. This is a great time if you were sidelined to jump back in and take a look at some of the properties. Go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. We would love to help you with that. Looking on going on the market in the next 6 weeks, get a hold of us and we can do those evaluations now. And we'll be right back here next week.
Right here on News Talk 870.